Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome. I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today has had a career as a health educator and is currently Professor Emeritus of Health and Human Sexuality at Mount St. Antonio College in Southern California. But with retirement, she has fulfilled her desire to return to her early passion for creative writing. Her first book, Our Song, a memoir of love and race, was published this year at the age of 70. She has also published in the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, West Wind UCLA, Journal of the Arts, Cultural Daily, and more. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Lynda Smith Hoggan.
Hi, thanks for having me, Julia.
Lynda, our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, what took you so long to write your first book?
Oh my gosh, that is a long and arduous tale, but I'll try to shorten it up. I actually wrote my first poem when I was 6 years old. So I started young, and I started a novella when I was 11, which I never finished. I don't know what happened to that little piece of art. And I wrote a bit in college. And after college, I had a couple of, small level publications, and I was really excited about having a writing career, but I had no idea how to have one. And it quickly hit me that I had to support myself before I could think about anything else. So, I kind of got off track with that and working on a career and so on. And so I only wrote a little bit sporadically through the middle of my life. But as I neared retirement, I wasn't there yet, but I was nearing it. And I started thinking, I really want to go back to creative writing. And I had a couple of book ideas. And then this one sort of came to the forefront because it was really a story of my heart, an idea that I had had for 40 years and wanted to get it down. So I wasn't even retired yet when I started the book, but I didn't finish it until after I retired.
Well, that's a pretty common story for most of us. I held a story in my head for more than 40 years as well. So I'm glad that we finally have gotten it down on paper. And I'm interviewing people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they're turning out beautiful work. So we still have a lot to say.
We certainly do, and maybe more than ever, because now we've lived a life,
Well, once you wrote this book, how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to use a hybrid, a small press, or did you self-publish?
The book that I started before this one was actually a self-help book. And I started pitching it to agents. And I got feedback that because it was a blended genre book, they just felt like they couldn't sell it. And one agent said to me, "Why are you writing this instead of the book of your heart?" And I went home and started the book of my heart. But then what? So what happened later on as I'm progressing through it was that COVID came along. And I honestly got very nervous in those early months, like many people. I mean, people were dying left and right, and there was no vaccine. And I thought, I don't want to die with my book not in print. And so a friend of mine who had actually published 12 books traditionally did her 13th with a hybrid publisher called She Writes Press. And I decided to apply to them. And they were enthusiastic about my book. And so I decided to enter into a contract with them. And, they did a beautiful job with my book. And of course, along came vaccines and other things to make COVID not seem quite so scary. But at the time I made the decision, I thought, I just don't want to die. And my book didn't go anywhere. So that was the impetus. And that was the reason for the choice I made. I didn't want to wait around for more agents, to say yay or nay.
And She Writes is quite well known for their memoirs.
Yeah. Brooke Warner at the helm is a memoir writer herself.
What do you think was the most challenging part of your artistic process?
The challenging part was not actually the artistic part. It was the fact that the story is of my first love in college. It was an interracial love story in, conservative rural Pennsylvania in 1972. And even though my lover and I did not end up together, we always stayed in contact. And I told him when I was planning to write the book, and in the beginning, I thought, gee, maybe we could even collaborate on it. But in the end, he's a very private person. He wanted no part of the book. He didn't want me to write the book. And that became, a thorn in our relationship because we weren't on the same page about it. And so I actually had a completed first draft when this all came to pass. And I knew and consulted with others as well that I needed to change details in the book to preserve his privacy. And that was really difficult for me because to me, he was who he was and he had the name that he had and, all the facts about him were who I knew that I had to turn into a slightly different person and be consistent throughout. And another thing that I had to change was that I still had his love letters and I had used them liberally throughout the book, only to find out I can't really quote his words without his permission. So that was another big, even bigger revision, actually, was what to do about the letters.
Well, tell us more about that because I think a lot of memoir writers run into that. I always ask, how does your family feel about your writing this memoir? Because a lot of families don't want these secrets to come out when they're on the page.
I know what you're saying. Well, my parents are no longer alive, nor grandparents, and I only have one sister, and she's just a little girl when the book takes place, when the story takes place. So I really didn't have those kinds of worries. I had a worry about him, and it had several sides to it. My publisher recommended that I have a legal vetting of the book, which meant hire an attorney to read it and give feedback on, whether he thought there were libelous things or, whatever those legal terms are. I get them mixed up, libel and slander. And also loss of privacy. And so he made some of the suggestions. He thought I had already done a pretty good job with that, but he made some suggestions. And of course, he said, the letters can't be there in their original form. And so what I decided to do was to take only short sections of the letters, a sentence or two at a time, change the verbiage so that it's similar but not exact. And that was hard too, because I loved those letters. They were really precious to me. And taking them out was like ripping out a piece of my heart. But I think it worked out well because I had several beta readers read the book in entirety. And a couple of them were before I took the letters out and after I took the letters out, or rather, paraphrase them. And they thought the book got better with the removal of the copious letter writing. they said, you love his words, but we love your thoughts. And so I thought that was really good feedback that, my reader is thinking more about me than about him.
Well, it gets very frustrating, I think, because that was your story, that was your truth and your life to tell, and it's disturbing that we have to be, so particular with with what actually happened.
That's right. Yeah. But sometimes we have to. And, I just didn't want anything to come back that would be harmful to my book or my story. So I knew I had to do it.
Do you still write every day? Are you writing a second book?
I have started a second book, although it's just in a few bits and pieces at this point. Um, I write nearly every day, but not so much as a practice the way some people do. But just various things that need to be written. For example, I had a few publications ask me to write articles related to themes in my book. And so there are themes of, loss of privacy, themes of betrayal, themes of getting over the past. And so I began writing some of those articles so that they could go into publications. And then I also just recently made a little bit of a return to my original book idea, which was a self-help book for women about food and sex called Licking the Spoon. And I, still really liked the idea. It wasn't the book of my heart like the memoir was, but I liked the idea. And I thought, I think I'm going to go back and just take a second look at this and see if I think it still has potential.
Did you explore the biracial relationship in any of your articles? I had a biracial relationship in my first book, and I grew up in the Deep South, so it was pretty significant.
Oh, yes. It's interesting because I spoke with a publicist who said, I don't think that you should write about race because right now just the atmosphere is that maybe we should hear more from people of color about race than from white people about race, because we've always heard about white people from white people about race. And I knew exactly what she meant, but I didn't entirely agree. I felt like, I still have things to say that I think are significant. And so I wrote an article that I published on Medium called Should White People Write and Talk About Race? And it's gotten a lot of I guess they're likes on Medium, over 100 likes from people who really appreciated what I had to say. But there's a very specific way that I wrote about it. And basically what I stuck with was my own experience of not having grown up around people of color, a very white town. And so getting to know people of color and finally, even living with a boyfriend's family, I learned some things about myself that, I, of course, had prejudices that I didn't know I had. And the reason I didn't know it is I was 19 years old, when you think you know everything. So it was a very educational experience for me. And I wanted to share some of that. So I put it into my article that I posted on Medium, and I may write more articles to that theme as well.
Well, I think the more conversations we can have about the subject is not harmful. I think it's most helpful.
It certainly can be, as long as it's not, hate rhetoric or anything like that.
Yeah.
But just about getting to know more about all of our shared humanity, I think is so important, because we tend to see other people as other, those other tribes. I guess it's just very tribal from our early ancestors. But nowadays, with the global environment being really so small, and particularly with the melting pot in this country, I think we just really need to listen to each other and appreciate each other.
Absolutely.
And on that note, I just want to mention, I just met a woman here in my town of Sacramento this weekend who is putting out a book with She Writes Press coming out next month. And it's a fascinating story. The title of her book is The Worst Thing We Ever Did. And it's her tale of being on a jury trial in Philadelphia in the 1970s, where the jury convicted an African-American activist man of murder. And she now thinks that they may have made a mistake. Yeah,
Wow.
powerful.
Yeah.
And she said, back when I was going through that experience, I knew nothing of white privilege. I had no comprehension of such a thing. And now that I do, I've had to rethink many things, including that trial.
Well, that's the old case of when we know better, we do better, I hope.
I hope to. Yeah. I haven't read her book yet. I just got it and I'm looking forward to it.
Did writing your first book change your process of writing?
Well, I had to be more diligent, because in the previous years, I just wrote a little thing here and there when it suited me. And when I got started on this book and knew I was really serious about it, I thought, this is such a major undertaking. I can't afford to just do it in dribs and drabs here and there. And so it became a big part of my life, to spend the time that I wasn't working when I was still employed. And then later, the time that I wasn't doing all the other things that you have to do in your life, that I have to be serious about it and I have to sit and spend hours doing it. And fortunately, because it was such a special story for me, I really enjoyed that time. And I relived that love affair, both good and bad. And I laughed and I cried. And, it was just like going through it all over again. And so I didn't dread it. I couldn't wait to get back to it and finish the story and then go in and edit it and make it better and have people read it and then make it better. So I just spent a lot more time, but it was really enjoyable time for the most part. There's times when you want to tear your hair out, because something isn't working or you've got to get rid of a section. Like when I first wrote my first draft, I had 129,000 words. And a memoir is really supposed to be 80 to 85,000. So I had a lot of cutting to do. And, I tore my hair out over that because to me, every scene was equally important. But that wasn't accurate. That was just my emotional state. So I had a lot of work to do.
Well, and I hope that the former boyfriend can appreciate the work that you've done and that it really truly is a love letter to the past and to that special time in your life.
It is, and I don't know, if he has read it. I haven't asked him. I wish he would, because I think if he did, he would see how much I loved him. But I don't know. So however it is for him, I hope that he becomes okay with it.
Were there any specific books or seminars or writing retreats or groups that you can share that improved your writing journey?
I think every single thing that I've done has been helpful in some way or another. I was really fortunate to get a mentor when I was in the early stages of actually writing that first book. And she coached me through things I needed to do. And so, she motivated me to get a blog set up. And so that became another type of writing that I did. And I learned from that. Some of my blog pieces are funny, and I didn't think that I wrote anything funny ever. But some of them are. And so that was a learning experience. And then she motivated me to go to conferences. And I, was in many workshops, some of them the kind that you write and then share your writing, others of them informational. Like I attended a couple that were on the legal aspects of writing memoir. Just everything so informative and educational, and meeting a lot of supportive people and a lot of people just like me that were trying to write and often insecure about what we were writing, and finding out that we're a community of writers who have so much in common. And then since then, I go to any workshop that I can afford to go to if it, seems to touch upon things that I'm working on. And there is always something, Julia. I never walk away going, oh man, was that ever a waste? There's always something. And I feel like I've just become a much better writer since doing those things. And those publications that you mentioned at the beginning, of course, the New York Times being my most near and dear at the moment. Those are all just done in recent years, not from way back when. And I feel like I maybe wouldn't have gotten those publications were I not doing things to better my writing. And another really big thing was that for the most of the writing of my memoir, I was in a critique group. We were 3 women. We were all writing memoir. And that group really helped me pull it together.
I think that's so important, to hear from others as we go along, and to have mentors and to be a mentor. And I think that helps all of our writing.
I think so too. And, I'm at the point now, I don't feel like a newbie quite so much anymore. And I do have things to share with other writers who maybe aren't quite as far along the path as I am. So that's fun too. I enjoy it.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the passage that you've brought to share today, and then read from it so we can hear your tone and voice.
Okay. And, I'm interested in that too, because I'm actually just going to get started on recording an audiobook of the book. So that'll be a whole nother interesting learning experience.
It really is. And I have started listening to all my books now. You wouldn't believe how many books I have on Audible right now, but it's
gosh,
so much easier for me when I'm traveling or when I'm riding my bike or working out, and you can listen, and it makes it just, really come to life in your head.
And is it ever painful to hear yourself?
I don't record my voice.
Okay.
You have a much kinder voice than I do, with this Southern accent that can probably grate on people's nerves. So I chose other narrators, but I love to hear them.
Yeah. And, the reason that I chose to do it myself is the fact that it's a memoir and it's my story and it's so personal to me. I just felt like it would be more personal to my listeners to hear my voice.
Yes, I agree.
So the background on this story is that, this is the part that I'm not exactly proud of, but I had a boyfriend who was studying in England for our junior year in college. And while he was away, a friend in my hometown who was going to one of the hometown colleges, invited me to a dance. And she particularly wanted me to meet this African-American guy from her school. And he was like the big man on campus, talented athlete, in the papers all the time. And by the way, very good looking and just genuinely nice. And she just had this idea that he and I should be together. And so I agreed to meet him, and I liked him, but, nothing happened from that first meeting. But then she arranged another one later when I was home on winter break. And she and I and another friend went to his dorm room. She said the athletes come back a day early to practice. And so we took some wine and weed and snacks and a trivia game and just showed up at his dorm. And, he was quite surprised, but probably pleased. He certainly let us in, and we had fun playing this trivia game and, smoking dope and drinking wine and just laughing and chatting. And as we're getting ready to leave, I had the feeling throughout the night that he was interested in me too, because the trivia game, some of the questions involved coming up with a word, like a certain number of syllables and beginning with a certain letter. And he kept getting this one category that was a 4-letter word beginning with T. And his first one was titillating, and he's looking right at me. And his second one was tantalizing, and he's looking right at me. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, my heart is beating. It's just really fun and kind of magical. And as we're getting ready to leave for the evening, he kind of takes me, by the hand and pulls me back and asks what I'm doing the next day. And I said nothing. And he said, well, he has practice, but, do I want to come and hang out afterward? And I said, sure. And I acted all nonchalant, like it was no big deal, but really it was a very big deal. And when I go out in the hallway, my girlfriends are like, what did he say? What did he want? And I'm just like, oh, just to see me tomorrow, and then they start screaming and there's a hullabaloo in the hallway. So he must have heard that. The passage that I'm going to read was when I went back the next day. I'll just hold this up so people can see. Okay.
I love the hands holding.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was a nice cover that She Writes Press did. The next night I returned with Rum and Coke. JT rolled a joint and put on a stack of records, and we began our communicative dance just sitting on his dorm bed. Politics, Tricky Dick, the Vietnam War, then our shared passion for music. From what I could tell, he had a nice stereo and a large collection of albums. We listened to our beloved high school Motown classics like the Temps, the Four Tops, the Supremes. He also played some rock tunes like the ones from the night before, and even more obscure artists I didn't expect, like the esoteric Laura Nyro. We took turns choosing songs, and as the beats and melodies ebbed and flowed, the dance became more intimate. Our bodies leaned closer, knees touching, his arm brushing against mine. I found out about the neighborhood he grew up in, inner city Washington, D.C., his mother's illness and stays in the hospital, the fatherless hours on the local basketball court that finally paid off in his being recruited to play for my hometown college, and oddly enough, my stepdad's alma mater. I told him about my own mother's mental problems, which were not certifiable yet, but omnipresent, my 2 unloving fathers, and a lonely childhood shuffled back and forth between parents and grandparents. Though afraid to break the mood, I still reminded him of my distant connection to another man. He thanked me for my honesty, but didn't ask more. Rum in my arteries, THC in my veins, oxytocin and dopamine bathing my brain. JT pulled me closer. Was it a dream, or was his essence now coursing through me too? His words, his smell, his smile, all tinctures blending with mine. Those eyes flickering like firelight, his lips on me, lips coming back to kiss me, kiss me. Deep murmurs and soft tinkling bells of laughter. Sounds and breathing. Sweating in January, my top coming off. Jeans unbuttoned and unzipped, everything off. Skin to skin, his strong arms under me, my long legs wrapped around his narrow hips. Isaac Hayes' low rumble repeating, your love so doggone good. Hips grinding, wet on wet, and then the rumble was inside us. I love you, someone whispered. Afterward, as we lay there recovering and I was trying to take it all in, the room began to turn like a merry-go-round. It went faster and faster until I jumped off, lurching out his door and down the hall to the men's bathroom to throw up in the toilet. JT followed. Do you need help? He asked from outside the stall. No, don't come in. A girlfriend could hold my hair, but I didn't want JT to see me that way. He stood watch at the door and then led me, shaking, back to his room. I'm sorry, I'm so embarrassed, I apologized. I shouldn't mix pot and liquor. I get the spins. It's okay. I understand, he said, and held me, stroking my face and hair until I was well enough to get up. Dawn was about to break, and it was time for me to go. My parents did not take kindly to my staying out all night. All right, JT said. Me too, I answered. As my internal fog lifted, and as if I wasn't already ashamed enough, I realized that it had been my voice whispering that I loved him. I paused at the door. Back there, when I said I love you, what I meant was that I love what I see of you so far. I know. JT placed one finger on my mouth, then leaned over and kissed my sour lips as if they were still sweet. Don't worry, he said, and his smile was more brilliant than the sun that lit his hair like a halo as it came streaming through the window. That's how it started, the love affair that would turn my life upside down. It would take me many years to understand how the young me was a paradox, smart but dumb, passionate yet blasé. I was an explorer trying to find my way, and I didn't have a map.
Wow, you have taken us right back to college and all those emotions.
And all those crazy behaviors.
Yeah, and all those hormones raging.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Lynda, what does writing success look like to you?
You know, when I met this woman on the weekend that wrote the book about the jury trial, she said something that is exactly how I feel. She said, I don't care so much about sales. I want my story to get out there. And so, of course, people buying books does mean sales. And that's nice, you know. It's nice to be paid for your work and to realize that people appreciate it. But even more, I think for me is to hear what people think of my writing. And does it stir something inside them? Does it inspire them to do something differently or think something differently? Get more enjoyment out of life, to get more peace with the past. Any of those kinds of things mean writing success for me. And of course, you know, for people to see my writing, I mean, it has to go into publication in one way or another, you know, whether someone else pays me to do it or I pay someone else to do it, or, you know, I put it myself on my website or on Medium, but it needs to get out there for people to see. And I'm working on that because I am better at writing than publicity, I have found out. Not so surprising, but, you know, it's a challenge. And there's so much good writing out there nowadays, and bad writing too. There's so much writing, period. You know, that it's a very competitive field. But I do have to say that the changes in the publishing world have made some things more difficult for writers, but have made some things easier for writers to get their voices heard.
That's so true. There's so many options for us, so many ways to publish these days. And I love to hear from someone when my story has touched them. I think that is success. I love that.
You know, when I had my little piece in the New York Times, and believe me, it's very tiny. It's in the tiny love stories column.
That's still huge. That's huge.
You know, I can say New York Times, so I'm thrilled. But I got letters from strangers who looked up my website, and they didn't even put my website on the page. So they had to Google me, go to my website, send me a message, and tell me how much they enjoyed reading that tiny little piece. And it was wonderful.
It's a real legacy for us to leave in the world, I think.
I think so too.
Well, our last interview question is, our writers over 50 are quite a unique set. Do you have advice for writers 50 and above?
It's not that different from what I would recommend to writers of any age, which is do your writing, because honestly, and this part is actually more of a message for maybe younger people, but I wish I had not spent so many years not writing very much, because I think I would be a better writer today had I consistently gone through my life writing, whether I published or not. But certainly people of any age, the more you do it, the better you get. And, don't just sit home in a closet with your computer. Get out in the world and share your writing with people and meet resources. Because, had I never met my mentor, I don't know how far along this road I would be. And I was over 50 when I met her and followed up with her. So there's a lot of resources out there, but if you're sitting at home, you won't find them. And, as we get older, we get tired. It's a little harder to get ourselves to get out and do things. But if you want your writing to be read by other people, you've got to do some of these things, networking and sending in to publications. I thought never in a million years is the New York Times going to publish me now. I'm so inexperienced still. And they snapped it right up. Yeah. And you just never know.
I think that's very encouraging to our writers today. And I think that we have so much more in us. And I think writing keeps us sharp and keeps us with a goal and something to do in our retirement. And I'm happy to say that you're now counted among our authors over 50.
Thank you, Julia. I am very thrilled to be in that group. And, I agree with something you just said. Well, everything you just said, but I think it keeps us sharp, because I don't like doing Sudoku, and I don't even like crossword puzzles because I never know the answers. But playing with words, is just another way of challenging your brain.
That's so true. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday, when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.